They drove back to the second precinct, and I was locked in. This time I was locked in a different cell with 4 strangers, 3 of them addicts. I lay on the narrow wood bench, twisting from one side to the other. My body was raw, twitching, tumescent, the junk frozen flesh in agonizing thaw. I turned over on my stomach, and one leg slipped off the bench. I pitched forward, and the rounded edge of the bench, polished smooth by the friction of cloth, slid along my crotch. There was a sudden rush of blood to my genitals at the slippery contact. Sparks exploded behind my eyes. My legs twitched. The orgasm of a hanged man when the neck snaps. The turnkey opened the door of my cell. "Your lawyer's here to see you, Lee," he said. The lawyer looked at me quite a while before he introduced himself. "I can see you don't feel much like talking now," the lawyer began. "You're charged in state. I talked to the federal DA an hour ago on the phone and asked if he was going to take the case. He said, absolutely no. There's an illegal seizure involved, and under no circumstances will this office prosecute the case. I think I can get you over to the hospital for a shot," he said after a pause. "The man at the desk now is a good friend of mine. I'll go down and talk to him." 2 cops took me over to Charity Hospital in the wagon. The nurse at the receiving desk wanted to know what was wrong with me. "Emergency case," said one of the cops. "He fell off a building." The cop walked away and came back with a heavy-set young doctor with reddish hair and gold-rimmed glasses. The doctor asked a few questions and looked at my arms. Another doctor with a long nose and hairy arms walked up to put in his 2 cents. "After all, doctor," he said to his colleague, "there is the moral question. This man should have thought of all this before he started using narcotics." Yes, there is the moral question, but there is also a physical question. This man is sick. He turned to a nurse and ordered half a grain of morphine. As the wagon jolted along on the way back to the precinct, I felt the morphine spread through all my cells. My stomach moved and rumbled. A shot when you are very sick always starts the stomach moving. Normal strength came back to all my muscles. I was hungry and sleepy. About 11 the next morning, a bondsman came around so I could sign the bond. He had the embalmed look of all bondsmen, as though paraffin had been injected under the skin. My lawyer Ty showed up around 12 to check me out. He had made arrangements for me to go directly to a sanitarium to take a cure. He told me the cure was necessary from a legal point of view. We drove to a sanitarium in a police car with 2 detectives. An attendant took my clothes, and I lay down on the bed waiting for a shot. My wife came to see me and reported that the management did not know anything about junk or junkies. When I told them you were sick, they said, "What's wrong? What's the matter with him?" I told them you were sick and that you needed a shot of morphine. And they said, "Oh, we thought it was just a question of a marijuana habit." "A marijuana habit?" I said. "What in the hell is that?" "Find out what they plan to give me," I told her. "I need a reduction cure. If they aren't going to give me one, check me out of here right now." A few minutes later, a nurse came in with a hypo. It was Demerol. Demerol helps some, but it's not nearly as effective as codeine in relieving junk sickness. At 9 p.m., I got another shot of Demerol. This shot had no effect. The third day and night of junk sickness are generally the worst. After the third day, the sickness begins to recede. I felt a cold burn over the whole surface of my body, as though the skin was one solid hive. It seemed like ants were crawling around under the skin. It is possible to detach oneself from most pain. Injury to teeth, eyes, and genitals presents special difficulties, so that the pain is experienced as neutral excitation. From junk sickness there seems to be no escape. Junk sickness is the reverse side of junk kick. The kick of junk is that you have to have it. Junkies run on junk time and junk metabolism. They are subject to junk climate. They are warmed and chilled by junk. The kick of junk is living under junk conditions. You cannot escape from junk sickness any more than you can escape from junk kick after a shot. I was too weak to get out of bed. I cannot lie still. In junk sickness, any conceivable line of action or inaction seems intolerable. A man might die simply because he could not stand to stay in his body. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I got another shot, which seemed to have some effect. As I learned later, this shot was not Demerol. I was even able to eat a little toast and drink some coffee. When my wife came to see me later in the day, she told me that they were using a new treatment in my case. When I was up and walking around, a psychiatrist came to interview me. He was very tall. He had long legs and a heavy body shaped like a pear with a narrow end up. He smiled when he talked, and his voice was whiny. He was not effeminate. He simply had none of whatever it is that makes a man a man. This was Dr. Fredericks, head psychiatrist of the hospital. He asked the question they all ask. Why do you feel that you need narcotics, Mr. Lee? When you hear this question, you can be sure that the man who asks it knows nothing about junk. I needed to get out of bed in the morning, to shave and eat breakfast. I mean, psychically. I shrugged. Might as well give him his diagnosis so he will go. It's a good kick. Junk is not a good kick. The point of junk to a user is that it forms the habit. No one knows what junk is until he is junk sick. The doctor nodded. Psychopathic personality. He stood up. Suddenly he moved his face into a smile that was obviously intended to be understanding and to dissolve my reticence. The smile took over and ended up an insane leer. He leaned forward and brought his smile close to my face. Is your sex life satisfactory? He asked. Do you and your wife have satisfactory relations? Oh, yes, I said, when I'm not on the junk. He straightened up. He did not like my answer at all. Well, I'll see you again. He blushed and lunged awkwardly for the door. He told my wife I had a very bad prognosis. I was feeling the shots less all the time, and after 8 days I began to pass them up. When I had passed the shots for 24 hours, I decided it was time to leave. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon when we left the hospital and took a cab to Canal Street. I went into a bar and drank 4 whiskey sodas and got a good lush kick. I was cured. As I walked across the porch of my house and opened the door, I had the feel of returning after a long absence. I was coming back to the point in time I left a year ago when I took that first joy bang with Pat. Pat came around as soon as he heard I was out. Did I want to pick up? Just one wouldn't hurt any. He could get a good price on 10 or more. I said no. You don't need willpower to say no to junk when you are off. You don't want it. Besides, I was charged in state, and state junk raps pile up like any other felony. A few days later, I stopped by my lawyer's office to talk about the case and to ask whether I could leave the state. "You're hot as a firecracker in this town," Ty told me. "I have permission from the judge for you to leave the state, so you can go any time you like." "I might want to take a trip to Mexico," I said. "Would that be okay?" "So long as you're back here when your case comes up, there are no restrictions on you." One client of mine went to Venezuela. So far as I know, he's still there. He didn't come back. As soon as I hit Mexico City, I started looking for junk. At least, I always had one eye open for it. One day I was walking down San Juan Letran and passed a cafeteria that had colored tiles set in the stucco around the entrance, and the floor was covered with the same tile. The cafeteria was unmistakably Near Eastern. As I walked by, someone came out of the cafeteria. He was a type character you see only on the fringes of a junk neighborhood. As the geologist looking for oil is guided by certain outcroppings of rock, so certain signs indicate the near presence of junk. Junk is often found adjacent to ambiguous or transitional districts. East 14th near 3rd in New York, Poydras and St. Charles in New Orleans, San Juan Letran in Mexico City. Stores selling artificial limbs, wig makers, dental mechanics, loft manufacturers of perfumes, pomades, novelties, essential oils. A point where dubious business enterprise touches Skid Row. There's a type person occasionally seen in these neighborhoods who has connections with junk, though he is neither a user nor a seller. But when you see him, the dowser wand twitches. Junk is close. His place of origin is Near East, probably Egypt. He has a long, straight nose. His lips are thin and purple-blue like the lips of a penis. The skin is tight and smooth over his face. He is basically obscene beyond any possible vile act or practice. He has the mark of a certain trade or occupation that no longer exists. If junk were gone from the earth, there might still be junkies standing around in junk neighborhoods, feeding the lack, vague and persistent, a pale ghost of junk sickness. So this man walks around in the place where he once exercised his obsolete and unthinkable trade. But he is unperturbed. His eyes are black with an insect's unseeing calm. He looks as if he nourished himself on honey and Levantine syrups that he sucks up through a sort of proboscis. What is his lost trade? Definitely of a servant class and something to do with the dead, though he is not an embalmer. Perhaps he stores something in his body, a substance to prolong life, of which he is periodically milked by his masters. He is specialized as an insect, for the performance of some inconceivably vile function. I'd been in Mexico several months. One day I went to see the lawyer I had hired to get working and residence papers for me. A shabby, middle-aged man was standing in front of the office. "He ain't come yet," the man said. I looked at the man. He was an old-time junkie, no doubt about it. And I knew he didn't have any doubts about me either. We stood around talking, and the lawyer came. The junkie was there to sell some religious medals. The lawyer had told him to bring a dozen up to his office. After I'd seen the lawyer, I asked the junkie if he would join me for supper, and we went to a restaurant on San Juan Letran. The junkie asked me what my story was, and I told him. He flipped back his coat lapel and showed me a spike stuck in the underside of the lapel. "I've been on junk for 28 years, he said. "Do you want to score?"